Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Estate IQ, the show that brings you deep insights into the South Florida real estate market. I'm thrilled to be here today with my good friend Ronald Rodriguez, President of Florida Property Tax Service. Ronald, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Today's a very special show. We're shooting on location from 1010 Brickell, one of the most beautiful buildings in the heart of the financial district of Miami. We're here in apartment 3608, one of the most beautiful units in the entire building. This building has amazing amenities. It's got indoor basketball courts, indoor running and track. It's got a fantastic setup. You really got to come and check it out. And today we have a very special show. We're going to be talking about something that hundreds, if not thousands of our viewers ask us about every week, and that's property taxes. The wonderful world of property taxes. And my friend Ronald is an expert like no other. So thank you for joining us today.
Those are kind words. Thank you.
So let's get started at the beginning, as they say. A lot of people complain about their tax rate. They say, oh, my taxes on my property are too high. How are property taxes actually formulated here in South Florida?
Well, there's two components to the property tax issue. There's the actual assessment, which is determined by the property appraiser's office. And then there's what they call the millage rate, which is determined by the taxing authorities. The combination of the two is what gives you what you're actually going to pay for taxes.
And the assessment is what the property appraiser believes the value of your home to be?
Correct.
Your property?
For that given year. So Florida, for example, is an annual assessment state. And so every year that value can go up or down depending on what the property appraiser feels is an appropriate market value for that year.
So understanding taxes and the calendar year sometimes gets confusing. When actually is your property assessed during the year? When do you know what that value is? And when does the actual tax bill come out? And for what period is that tax bill?
Well, every property here is assessed as of the first day of each year, so January 1st, in this case 2018. However, you won't find out what that value is until you can generally find it online, maybe in July or something like that, but you won't get the actual what's called the trim notice until towards the end of August. And that's your official notification from the property appraiser's office of your assessment and your valuation for tax purposes. So
variations in the actual tax you pay can come either from the assessed value or the millage rate. Correct.
I mean, your assessment might, technically go down, but if the millage rates went up, your taxes could go up, or vice versa. Your assessment might go up, but your millage rate goes down for whatever reason, and so your taxes might actually decrease.
So, I've seen some of these trim notices. You can find them online for any property that you're researching. It's a little confusing. There's a lot on there. There's school board, there's county, there's city. What does all that mean?
Well, you have three taxing authorities, and so you have the school board, the county, and the city portion. If you live in unincorporated Dade, the county picks up the city portion. So when you get that trim notice, you'll have the breakdown, and you'll see it clearer on your actual bill that you'll receive in November. You'll see the breakdown between the school board, the city, and the county, and what you're paying for each one of those sections to those taxing authorities.
Is there a maximum rate that each one of those boards can charge?
There's a maximum of 10 mils, which is the equivalent of 1%. And so right now, hypothetically, the highest rate that you can have between the three taxing authorities is a 3% tax on your property's value. Right now, it's much less than that. I mean, for example, unincorporated Dade is like 17.5107 mils, or 1.7% and change. You can go as high as City of Miami might be anywhere between 21 and 23 mils, depending on that area. I think Opelika right now is the highest at around 24 mils.
So is there a difference in what we pay if we actually live in this property, if it's our homestead, versus if it's maybe an investment property and it's not our homestead? Are there different calculations that are made?
Yeah, I mean, if you live in the home, if it's your primary residence and you have a homestead exemption, you can have that homestead exemption, which will basically cap your increase year over year to 3%. And so what that does is that, for example, you saw it a lot more back in the heydays here when property values doubled year over year or something like that. But essentially, if your property was worth $500,000 this year, and now next year it's worth, say, $600,000, you would be limited to a maximum, say, $515,000 because of your homestead exemption.
So that 3% cap on homestead properties is on the assessed value.
Correct. You'll have a market value and an assessed value. The market value being what the property appraiser thinks it's worth, and then the assessed value is usually either the same or lower than the market value, and that's going to represent a taxable value depending on what exemptions or other things you may qualify for in calculating your taxes.
So a lot of our investors that watch our show, they come to invest in properties in South Florida, and many of them invest in cash. Can they expect their, because it's not a homestead property, what can they expect in terms of maximum increases if they don't have that 3% cap?
Right now you can currently have a 10% cap on non-homestead properties, second homes, commercial properties, investment properties, etc. That 10% limit, though, is only for the city and county portion of your tax bill.
Okay.
In other words, the school board tax is at the full market value.
Right.
There's no cap on the school board portion. Aside from that, they can also expect that in their initial year of purchase, all those figures will recalculate. In other words, they'll come back up to market because if somebody was owning a property for a number of years, they might have had some limitations on their taxes which kept their tax rate artificially lower. Purchasing a property, changing the ownership or the entity that holds the property, any change to the deed will trigger a new assessment. Right,
so this is a very important point for our audience, because many of our audience, when they come and they are looking at properties, maybe the realtor who is listing the property will show them the current taxes, and they'll say, these are the taxes now. And what you're saying is, when a property changes hands, the person who's buying that property should not expect to pay that same amount of tax. It will get reassessed the following year.
Correct. I mean, it depends. The likelihood is, yes, that you're going to have a much drastic number, but if the market value and the assessed value are relatively close the year prior to the purchase, your taxes are going to be relatively the same. It's just a matter of making sure that the buyers are aware that depending on their situation, each property is going to get reassessed, and the effect of their tax rate may be vastly different.
Now the actual property tax, as we know it, there seems to be two different kinds of tax. So one that's called ad valorem tax and the tax called non-ad valorem tax. How are those two interrelated?
So ad valorem taxes are based on the property's value. Non-ad valorem taxes are taxes that are set by either a special taxing district or the municipalities. For example, you'll see a lot of the garbage fee, $400-something, depending where you're at. There might be a fire fee where you're living. If you have a property in a CDD, the CDD will have its own tax rate that's fixed on an annual basis.
So the actual tax is basically the sum of the ad valorem taxes set by these three boards plus the non-ad valorem taxes, which are not related to the value of your property.
Correct.
So Ronald, the million-dollar question, what do we do if we feel our property taxes are too high?
Depending on the type of property that you have, you may want to consult with a professional and seek out their advice. Some people may want to reach out to the property appraiser's office, talk to them, maybe as a good starting point. The type of property that you have is really going to make the difference between what avenue you go down in appealing your property taxes.
So there is an appeals process. Correct. Now, is somebody coming to my house and measuring the square footage and saying, okay, your house is assessed at this and your neighbor's house is assessed at this? How are they assessing this?
No, I mean, the county assesses properties in mass. And so what happens is that they group areas and types of properties together, come out with whatever their formula is for a price per square foot, let's say, and then assign that to all the properties in that area within certain parameters.
Right.
And so what happens is that you have properties that may fall through the cracks. Maybe your home or your property doesn't conform to the other properties in your area. Perhaps the homes in your area have all been remodeled. You don't have a house like that.
Right.
Or you own a shopping center that hasn't been remodeled, or for whatever reason is getting lower rents than the properties around you. And so those are instances where it makes a lot of sense to have somebody look at those taxes and potentially appeal.
So because of differences in methodology, you think particularly for commercial properties, it's a good idea to have someone like yourself to understand and look at the assessed values.
Especially commercial properties, because you have, depending on the property, so many different types of valuation methods for those properties. And so depending on the uniqueness of your property, it may make even more sense for you to be appealing or having this looked at on an annual basis.
So I'm looking at our screen here, and some of our live viewers are writing in. Thank you for your questions. And one viewer is saying, my neighbor is paying a lot less tax than I am. What could be a possible explanation?
Well, that's an issue with the homestead exemption. And so if you just recently moved into a neighborhood, you'll find that your homestead tax rate is going to be, or not tax rate, but tax bill is going to be much higher than your neighbor that's been living there for 10 or 20 years. And that's just a function of the homestead exemption capping your valuation increase to 3% on an annual basis. Eventually things will come around, your neighbor will move, and somebody will move in next to you, and they'll be paying a lot more than you will.
Okay. Well, as you can tell, this wonderful world of property taxes is large and complex. This is why we have friends like Ronald who can advise us. I really appreciate you coming. To all of you watching, thank you for sending in your questions. Please keep them coming in. We'll get to answer them online a little later. And again, we want to encourage you to continue sending us suggestions for new shows, new guests as well. We'll be transmitting this through our Facebook pages, and we will do after this a Spanish language show as well for Latin American investors. So we hope all of you get to come and visit this beautiful building at 1010 Brickell. It's really spectacular. We highly recommend you stopping by. And until next time, have an awesome day. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.